In His Voice podcast, hosted by me, Rob L. Lowe, where we talk about those things that deeply impact the lives of boys and men without ever bashing women. We talk about everything from the bedroom to the boardroom, from the playground to the stadium, and everything in between. And as I stated in other podcasts, season 4 is going to be something different. I was going to touch on much more personal, gut wrenching, emotional topics. And today's topic, man, is really, really something different. In the last couple of months, I lost at least 2 people very close to me. Personally, I lost a first cousin, and I lost my pastor, who was my spiritual mentor and one of my close friends. And then also had to witness 2 of my fraternity brothers, line brothers, lose their moms in the last couple of months. And you know, we're not the only men to experience loss. Let me say that. No loss is one greater than the next. But what I realize is that many men struggle to show grief or to let others know that they're grieving for a variety of reasons. And some of it I'll talk about. Some of it is just stereotypes. Some of it is pressure. Some of it is just personal experience. For me, it's hard for me to grieve or to show grief or to mourn over the period of time. It usually hits me when I'm in that moment and I'm at the funeral or the celebration of life, and it's the finality of that. But as I head towards my 55th birthday, mortality seems very real for me now. So I'm in California, and I have this really cool podcast studio, and I shoot this podcast, and I have this great career, and I wrote this book, and God blessed me with this gift to be a very insightful and powerful speaker. Some say motivational speaker, some say minister. Most people don't know I got ordained over 22 years ago. But none of that takes away from the reality of that life has an end date. And so on this podcast, I want to talk about why men struggle with mourning or showing grief, and how do we overcome that? The value of digging into that and experiencing that, and the impact of not doing that. So let's talk about a couple things. So let me read a couple things for you. Men often struggle with showing grief due to a mix of societal expectations, their personal upbringing, their personal coping mechanisms. Many cultures reinforce the ideal that masculinity is associated with strength, stoicism, and emotional control, discouraging men from openly expressing sadness or vulnerability. This is an interesting point. From a young age, boys may be taught explicitly or implicitly that crying or showing deep emotions is a sign of weakness, which causes men in many cases to channel their emotions into actions such as work, hobbies, or physical activity rather than expressing them outward. And then there's some things around biologically and neurologically. Studies show that men and women have different neurological and hormonal responses to emotional distress. So that's true. But let's go back to some of these things. Most importantly, how boys are raised and how we're taught to show or not show our emotions. I remember as a kid, and this is real, I remember as a kid, I was the only son, my mother's youngest son, I'm the only son. I'm the youngest child and the only son. And when my mom died at 7, and we went to live with my grandparents. My grandparents bought me a football. And I'm probably 8 or 9. And I was outside playing with the football, and my older cousins would take the football, and, you know, they would go play, and they wouldn't let me play, and give me back my ball. And I start crying, like, oh, you won't give me my ball? And I would go tell. And my grandfather would say, boy, stop crying. Stop crying. Like, and they would call me a crybaby. Like, you're crying. Go out there and get your ball back. Like, make them let you play. Now, they were bigger than me, and then everyone laughed and thought it was funny. But I just remember that pain, that anger. And at the time, of course, I don't know why I'm crying. I don't know why I'm not as tough as other people. I don't know why I'm emotionally in this place and why I would think that they would treat me better. But it was emphasized to me that I just need to toughen up and go deal with it. And after being called a crybaby so long, and after experiencing so much loss, I came to expect that, 1, I'm not supposed to show emotion. 2, I shouldn't expect anybody to care or do anything for me. And so by the time I was a teenager, I was almost numb to the fact that people would do me wrong, which also turned into me having very little empathy. I actually did a Gallup professional survey. I think it was Gallup. And I am an HR leader who cares about people. I connect with people. I can read people. I inspire people. I motivate people. My lowest score on the Gallup professional survey, I think it was Gallup, when they did my profile, was empathy. Lowest. But you would never know it because I'm trained by profession and through life's experiences to make sure that I connect with people and meet them where they're at and pour into them. But it does not mean that intrinsically I feel something. And that affects how I mourn. When my grandmother died, they called me. I was in the bed in Texas with my wife at 3 a.m. And when they called me, they said, you know, she's passed. I said, okay, let me know and I'll be home. I didn't cry. Because at that point, I was just tired of her suffering and so many other things I was feeling. I was like, okay. And when I got home, I cried and I saw her, but same thing with my grandfather. Because my wish as a young man was, I just prayed that God would let me live long, or let them live long enough for me to be able to stand on my own too and provide for myself. And so that I would not have to go live with anybody else in my family and rely on them to take care of me and my sisters. That was my prayer. My prayer was, God, let them live long enough that they will take care of us and me till I can take care of myself, because I do not want to go live with no one else. I want you to think about how powerful that prayer is. So when they passed, I missed them, but I was glad that God allowed them to let me be on my own. And so I mourn differently than other people. With the passing of my pastor and my cousin, I got a call for both. And when Terry called me about my pastor and my friend Ron, the phone rang. It was in the middle of the day. And I looked at the phone, and before I picked up the phone, I knew instantly. When he called me, I said, Terry, don't be giving me no bad news. I didn't give him a chance to say, I said, Terry, don't give me bad news. Because I knew. I felt it. He said, man, I said, Terry, I'm not trying to hear that right now. He said, he passed. I said, Terry, I told you I didn't want no bad news. I told you that. Man, I said, all right, I'll talk to you later. And I hung up. Because in that moment, that ain't what I was trying to hear. I wasn't going to break down. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to cry at that moment. I was more frustrated because I told him not to give me that news. But he had to. I understand. And then I had to process, like, man, how much time went by before I saw him last? I processed grief in the sense that what are the things I could have done different while they were here? Not so much I grieve that they're leaving. I think that's something else that's different. I've seen people and I know people that when they lose someone, they cannot fathom the ideal of living life without them. I don't have that problem. I don't. I go through the emotional challenges of what could I have done different while they were here? That's where my mind goes. The idea of them not being here is just a reality of life. And maybe that's where that empathy score is so low, because I accept that we all have a finite time and that morality, or excuse me, our mortality, not morality, our mortality has an expiration date. We're not immortal. And so as you think about this, maybe I'll give you guys this to think about, because this is a very heavy subject. Let me speak to men first. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to cry, whether that's because of a lost loved one, because of a friend, because of a change, because we often grieve. That's the other thing. We don't realize that grief isn't just about death. Grief is about letting go of something, of someone that we really cared for and had a strong connection to. You can grieve many things or many people. But when it comes to people, it's okay to hurt. It's okay to cry. It's okay to share how you feel. It does not take away from your masculinity. It does not take away from your emotional intelligence. You're just being a human. And so sometimes what people need from us, they need to see our ability to grieve, because they need to connect with us in that moment while they're grieving. And yes, there are times we have to be strong. But as I said in another podcast, if you keep pouring water out of a pitcher, eventually the pitcher will be empty and you can't pour any more water into someone else's cup. At some point, the pitcher has to be refilled. And then for ladies, if you're watching this, family members, he may not grieve the way that you do, but it does not mean he's not grieving. There may be a lot of things in his childhood, in his adulthood, in his past, his coping mechanisms that dictate how he grieves. Just allow him the space to grieve. And just because he doesn't grieve like you, don't underestimate the power of his grief and his desire to mourn someone that he lost. For those of you that are watching this podcast that are going through dealing with the loss of someone special, if you're grieving, if you're mourning and you can't get past this, seek a therapist. That's okay too. Some things, some losses are harder to deal with than others for certain people. And it does not take away from your relationship with God, your ability to be strong, who you are, if you have to go talk to someone to help you through this. There's a lot of resources out there available for you. Use them. Grief is powerful. It hurts. But it is part of the journey to healing. And, Matthew 5:4 said, those who mourn will be blessed. Grief counselors at your church, grief counselors at your job, don't be afraid to ask for help. And for those of you that are currently going through it, my prayers are with you and your family. And I hope something in this podcast blesses you, touches your spirit, touches your heart, and leads you to a path of healing. Again, Matthew 5:4. The Bible said, blessed those who are mourn, right? For they will be blessed. They will be blessed. And then it says, a man weepeth in the night, but joy will come in the morning. Just know that, all right? I know it's a serious subject, but again, I hope you got something out of it. And I pray that God covers you and gives you peace on your journey. God bless, and I'll see you on the next episode of the In His Voice podcast. Take care.